Thank you. Can you hear me at the back? Good morning, General Bhardwaj, Vice Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Now, today we'll be talking about the impact of the air and naval operations on Operation Vijay, the overall conduct of the Kargil War. Now, it was in early May that we detected some suspicious movement in the metallic sector, and thereafter the machinery got rolling. The army got its act in place, and generally the mobilization took place, and the event started, developing as far as the infiltration was concerned. But we were still not very aware of the ground situation as to what was the extent of the enemy, how much was his deployment, what are the type of weapons, etc., which he was having. And there was a requirement to get the Air Force into this complete, operations. But there were some reservations, and very rightly so, because once you deploy the air, it's a declaration of war, and it is also climbing the escalatory ladder. So I just want to ask you, Arun, what are these reservations, and why were these reservations there till a certain point of time before the Air Force actually stepped in?
Good morning, General Bhardwaj, ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls. Firstly, it's my honor and privilege to be around to talk to you and convey in person whatever that I have experienced in Kargil per se. To the question, yes, actually initially when there was a fog of war, it was initially time of May, and I was commanding that time 129 HU Nubra Warriors in Hinton, and my posting had already come to air headquarters. That's the time it happened, and I was actually in a so-called switch-off mode. I was going to air headquarters and I'd finished my command, hopefully okay. But this thing happened, and just that was 17th of May that I was inducted into Srinagar. Just 2 days prior to that, we had a visit of Air Marshal Patni, the AOC Western Command, who was in the thick of it at that point of time, and it just coincided also with his visit to Air Force Station Hinton. So we were on an inspection visit, but in the entire inspection, I think he spent most of the time with me in the squadron, and I was really absolutely not aware. We just opened up the maps, and that's the time he told that, hey, Anil, there's supposed to be some intruder, some kind of a situation in Kargil, and he showed the places where it's supposed to be. And we had a little discussion, and then called me next day. He said, just think over it and let me know. And for sure, that is on 17th of May, I got a message from AOC that, hey, Anil, that CNC has called us. But till that time, I was also not really taking it very seriously because we were not aware what is happening. Of course, not newspapers, nothing at all. So that's the time, yes, I said, yes, something serious. We went to the CNC's office. We had a discussion for about 1 hour. And thereafter, I came back, one aircraft, Chandigarh to Srinagar, and I was there at Srinagar. So yes, I can maybe a bit comment on, yes, that why the Air Force was initially so reluctant to get into the operation, because yes, initial requirement as per the inputs was that there are some intruders and can we take them on? Well, the air power as such is not used in this piecemeal manner, because once you use the air power, means actually it's an indirect way of declaration of war. So that is the first main reluctance to use the Air Force, because the Air Force has got its own his way of operating, because it has got its own role, something like the Navy. It's in a very broader sense that we create a situation, we create a degradation for our army to move in. So it's all team effort of all three, and we have a specific role, how we play that role for the entire combat or the war which happens. So there was a huge reluctance at that point of time, and not only the reluctance because of one factor, that is declaration of war, also in what way that we will be able to take on these operations, because these operations were on the high altitude area where the man, machine, and the weapon system had never been tried as such. So this is the main worry of the Air Force, that why we actually didn't want to really go full bore at that point of time with the limited information and intelligence on the enemy.
Thank you, Arun. Somewhere around the 27th or 28th of May, there was a helicopter which was shot down by the enemy when you were trying to engage point 5140. And also in the same time frame, Squad Leader Ahuja's aircraft was shot down and Flying Officer Nichiketas was captured. Now, you were leading the helicopter operation, your flight, and can you tell us very, very briefly as to how the helicopter got shot down, firstly, and secondly, these three major incidents which were setbacks for the Air Force, did they contribute to the finally giving the go-ahead to the Air Force to step into the operations?
I'll just briefly go over it, and please don't mind if I get carried away because it's really very close to my heart. And right from the beginning, right from the day one, I had been the task force commander. So not just only leading the every attack on the enemy, but I was also in the planning also for the Air Force from the helicopter side. And for the fighter side, we had another Group Captain Oak. He was the task force commander for the fighters. It's both of us that we had actually we had conceptualized that how the Air Force is going to operate at that particular scenario, at that particular time of information. So the plan was basically to sum up that helicopters would be slow, but the target acquisition will be most accurate. Fighters will be very fast. However, the target acquisition in the mountains would be not so easy. So we had a combination of both, helicopters as well as fighters. So the attack was so synchronized that once the fighters are attacking, we know it will not be so accurate really, but just the sound of the aircraft, they dive in and pull out, the enemy's head would be down, and whilst the enemy head is down, that's the time we'll be rolling into strike, and exactly as they pull out, we'll be releasing our weapon. So in that noise and in the psychological effect, while the enemy head is down, that's the time we'll be rolling in. So that also kind of camouflage or subdues our noise levels as well. So this was the format which we all had agreed to, which we all had given a briefing to the CNC as well as the chief, who had come on 25th night to give okay to the CACS that yes, we are ready. So we followed the same plan, and so again on the 28th was actually the third strike. 26th was the first strike on 0650. I think before we go ahead, I would like to show you a small little video with your permission, sir. There are two videos. Yeah, this one is an animated one that gives you a little kind of a story and a context.
At the close of the last century, our nation faced a very distinctive, challenging and precarious manner of intimidation. In 1999, the territorial integrity of the Indian nation was violated by Pakistan in the icy heights of the Kargil sector, with an aim to pressurize the Srinagar to Leh National Highway and force India to throw away the Siachen Glacier. The Indian Army responded by positioning superior ground forces in a phenomenal and record-breaking effort to teach the enemy a lesson by launching Operation Vijay. The initial targets chosen to be cleared were the Tiger Hill complex and Tololing Ridge, the deepest incursion of enemy and closest to the National Highway. On 23rd May, 18 Grenadier and 1 Naga regiment of the Indian Army assaulted the enemy on Tololing Ridge, but accurate and deadly enemy fire brought the Indian attack to a grinding halt by the 24th. It was at this juncture the RAF was called in to commence its close air support campaign in Kargil. The dedicated helicopter gunships of the IAF were not able to operate effectively in the rarefied air of the Kargil sector. Service ceiling of heavy-duty gunship helicopter Mi-35 was limited to 10,000 feet, while the occupied heights at Kargil were at 15,000. In a first of its kind, a decision was taken by the IAF to convert its troop-carrying workhorse, the Mi-17 helicopter, into an attack gunship. It was the only IAF helicopter capable of operating between 10 to 18,000 feet with some manner of ordnance. At those heights, it could carry 4 UB-32 rocket pods with S-557NN rockets. Keeping in mind the envisaged role, Mi-17 helicopters of 129HU, the Nubra Warriors, and 152HU, the Mighty Armor, were inducted into Srinagar Air Base during mid-May. This offensive component was commanded by a tough and experienced veteran of the Siachen Glacier Operation Tour, Wing Commander A.K. Sinha. They had arguably the most difficult task of the air assault operation to undertake, move at precariously low operational speeds while straining their machines to hang on in thin air, face the gauntlet of enemy anti-aircraft effort, and stay focused enough to engage and destroy the enemy. Some would say that their way led to certain death. At Tololing, the enemy comprised mainly of soldiers from Pakistan 4 and 6 Northern Light Infantry, supported by elements of the elite Special Service Group Commandos. They were well equipped for a protracted campaign and geared to survive high-altitude warfare. Their formidable arsenal consisted of Dushka and KPVT heavy machine guns. All Pakistani fortified Sangar complexes had at least a couple of these belt-fed guns, which were formidable anti-aircraft weapons, beside being infantry-killing machines. However, the most feared weapons in the Pakistani arsenal were the man-portable surface-to-air missiles, MANPADs. These were the Stinger and Answer II. Operation Safed Sagar commenced with true grit, guts and glory in the early mornings of the 26th of May. The IAF commenced full-fledged rocket and bomb attacks against enemy positions, starting with MiG-21 and MiG-27 fighter jets, shortly followed by the Mi-17s. The Indian Army soldiers fighting on the icy heights had a new savior. The air reverberated with the radio calls of rockets away. The air attacks followed a similar profile on 27th May, and that's when the first of the SAMs were encountered over Tololing. The Indian helicopter's survival lay in the infrared flares being integrated, which were used to deflect the heat-seeking SAMs from their targets. But the question was there enough supply of the same to equip all the Mi-17s? At 0200 hours on the 28th of May, preparation and arming of the 4 Mi-17s for the planned assault for the morning had been done. Nubra 1, 2, 3 and 4, a 4-aircraft formation, was at the launch pad. The target was point 5140, the most well-defended enemy-held position, with covering anti-aircraft fire zones from the Tololing top, as well as point 4590. Wing Commander Sinha was Nubra leader. However, Nubra formation had a problem. The IR flare dispensing system on board Nubra 3 was not functional. Sinha advised the pilot of Nubra 3, Flight Lieutenant S. Mohinder, to stay on the ground. But a charged-up and overtly brave Mohinder was not the one to back out. The flight commander of 152HU, squadron leader Rajiv Pundir, volunteered to fly as the co-pilot along with Mohinder. The whole formation vowed to deliver their most devastating blow right in the enemy's lair at height 5140. Their fighting ethos were to be tested soon. The 4-ship Nubra formation took off as planned, and the pilots lined up in staggered positions to proceed to their targets. The helicopters would carry out trailing attacks, with time between the attack run of each helicopter. Also, attacks from different directions were to be carried out. They had, however, been spotted well in advance by the Pakistani defenders. The stream of hot lead followed the attack run of Nubra 1, who, unshaken, released his salvo of rockets on the Pakistani positions. The enemy started shooting off SAMs, and Sinha spotted a couple of them, which flew past him due to the deception of the IR flares and sheer good luck. He ducked towards the safety zone of the Bimbat Nala and saw Nubra 2 move in and carry out a well-executed rocket attack. Sinha was, however, worried about Mohinder and Pundir in Nubra 3, as he saw a barrage of SAMs flying around in the air. Nubra 3 continued onto the target. dodging the initial fusillade of fire and a couple of SAMs which missed the helicopter. Over the target, Nubra 3 fired all its complement of rockets, which landed over the target in an effective manner. The NLI commander at point 5140 shouted for all SAM launchers to fire at will. The SAMs kept flying around Nubra 3 and missing them. It seemed for a moment that they had cheated death in the absence of any flares to distract the heat-seeking SAMs. But then, just as Nubra 3 banked to lose altitude, it was struck by a engulfed in flames and hit the valley floor before breaking apart. Meanwhile, Nubra 4 carried out his attack and ducked in to commence the exit maneuver. Sinha watched the whole scene in grim silence and saw his worst fears coming true. As he radioed the formation to extricate as planned, his mind was overwhelmed with grief and the realization of the sacrifice and selfless bravery of the Nubra 3 crew. The sacrifice of Nubra 3 did not go in vain, as the Mi-17 attacks had shaken the Pakistani defenses on the Tololing Ridge and helped the Indian Army to commence a fresh campaign of dislodging attacks against the Pakistanis. The Indian Army captured all enemy positions on the Tololing Ridge by the 17th of June 1999 in praiseworthy assaults. The Indian Air Force stopped all Mi-17 gunship operations in light of their vulnerability in the heightened SAM environment. For the record, upward of 20 SAMs were fired on Nubra formation. This event depiction pays homage to the selfless courage of all pilots of the Mi-17 gunship formations from 129 and 152 HU who took part in the rocket attacks in Kargil Theatre of Operation 1999. The 4 gallant martyrs of 152 HU were posthumously awarded the Vayu Sena Medal for their unrivaled act of bravery. They all knew that they faced certain death in light of their system limitations, but they chose to carry on the mission in the finest traditions of the Indian Air Force. The courageous action of Nubra 3, which was unmindful of danger to personal safety, typifies the courage of the IAF's helicopter pilots, who have time and again demonstrated such qualities during various operations. The Mi-17 gunship leader was awarded with a well-deserved Vir Chakra for gallantry in the face of enemy. Jai Hind.
So this in very brief, actually, I thought I'll show this small little documentary. It was an animated version. Sorry, sir. We'll not show this one. I think this is good enough. We just stop the other one. So this entirely actually summarizes what kind of operation which took place exactly on 28th of May. Well, we started on 26, the very first strike on 06 at 0650. Thereafter, we had on 27th and then 28th. So the first strike when we had on 26th, I must tell you that that strike was very, very effective and the enemy was totally pulverized. What we used to do is we used to land just short of Dras at place known as Matayan. We used to pick up an army guy from the battalion who was fighting there. So he would show us the post. We used to take him on the helicopter and he would show us the post. Because there was no intelligence available, there were no photographs, there were no pictures, there were no coordinates available of the target. So he would show us the target, okay, here is the target. So there was no question that we would ever go wrong, that we fire somewhere else. So we had one Major Adhikari also, I still remember, later on he got a Mahavir Chakra posthumous. We had taken him in a helicopter the second day. While we had taken him on the second day, he was in Srinagar with us and thereafter we dropped him back. He was the one, he told me, in fact it's never in the book, nobody knows about it, but he told me in person that, sir, your very first strike after Tolole, there was an intercept that ab hum capture hone wale hain. That was the kind of might of the strike. It's 128 rockets, one helicopter, so into 4. So that many rockets pumped in at the same time. It's amazing. It's 100 to 200 meters of area, you can just plaster it. So not only the effect of the rockets, but also the psychological effect that was on the enemy. But however, we had to abandon these on 28th because the helicopter was shot down. On 27th, We had Nachiketa's aircraft going down. His strike was pretty good. The very first run which he had done, it was pretty effective. He came in for a second strike, and that's the time there was a problem, technical problem, that aircraft had to go down and he had to abandon and punch out with the aircraft, and finally he was taken as a captive. Ahuja, it's called Ahuja, he was in the BDA aircraft. That's a bomb damage assessment aircraft, which after we do a strike, that the other aircraft, the fighter, it follows over the target and captures the pictures. So once we come back, there's a debrief whether the rockets or the bombs, they went to leave the target or not, or we can do some corrections. So that is a BDA aircraft. Ahuja, he saw Nachiketa going down. So he was on the top for a little while, so as to locate where Nachiketa had gone down, so as to thereafter we can carry out a rescue operation. So unfortunately that area was infested with the shoulder-fired missiles, the manpads, Stingers, and he got hit by a Stinger. So on 27th we lost 2 aircraft. On 28th, the same strike which I showed you, which I was leading, we lost another helicopter. So something was amiss, because 3 days we lost 3 aircraft, which is a very, very huge thing in the international level. Once you see, you get 3 days, 3 aircraft gone down. So the IF then it took a little time to revise the strategy, that whether this is okay or not okay, because here we were going very close to the enemy. They were all dive attacks, and where we are in a close proximity to the enemy. So thereafter on 28, the helicopters was taken off. The fighters also, the dive attacks which they were doing, that were also stopped. So the strategy, and there was a switch of gear at that point of time when Air Force thought that now we should be in a phase 2, and therefore that thought that the next phase of the operation started.
Yeah, thanks Anil. That video is very, very well conducted. Now, we'll be running out of time, so I just want a brief account of what are the major achievements of the Air Force during the Kargil War. Just touch on those very briefly.
Fine, sir. Actually, like the achievement, the first very achievement itself is that we actually surprised General Musharraf. That was the biggest achievement, because this whole strategy which he was building for last nearly 1 year, now you're all aware, we had good sessions in the other hall, that Air Force was totally taken off from his books, because if you read the books, you read the graphs, you see the performance, they're all available all over. So there is no aircraft which is designed to be operating at those altitudes of 15,000 to 20,000 feet. So there are no weapons, there are no aircraft which are designed to operate. So therefore, he knew that Air Force will not be able to operate and intervene. And that was the biggest shocker, and which really turned the tables for him. And that's why after the very first strike, they were totally taken aback at how Air Force has come into it. And so that was one biggest achievement. Of course, thereafter the improvisation, because these aircraft are not designed, and that is where the man behind the machine comes in always. Because we will read all the books. Today morning we had a nice session with General Harinder sir, because you also need to read. Initially we get trained, thereafter we increase our own knowledge by reading, and thereafter as we keep becoming senior and becoming leaders, we need to combine together. And also now it is an advanced phase, that how we'll be able to apply the application of knowledge, converting into action. I guess it is most important, and this is exactly what the Air Force did at that point of time. They picked up the most experienced guys in the Air Force, and if you see the career of the pilots, the maximum stage where you reach in flying proficiency is the commanding officer. After that you get into the desk, you get into the planning, strategy, etc. and all that. So the commanding officers, they were put into task to how we can go beyond the performance of the aircraft. So therefore, like for example, like for the Mi-17s, these rockets are designed only to fire on the planes just for a kilometer range, but there we have to fire in 3 kilometers range to be away from the standoff range of the weapons of 1.8 kilometers. Then we have the Mirages which came in. Mirages, once again, because of these sanctions at that point of time, they were not even though they're capable of laser-guided bombs, have a precision strike, but at that point of time, because of the sanctions, that was not available to them. And it was an overnight thing in a very few days when they were foreseeing the strategy. So a lot of all these test pilots, engineers, technicians, they got on the job, and they could get these lightning pods in the sense like you have a sensor, so as to the bombs can be guided through a laser guided. So that was done overnight. That was again like a creativity or innovation which was done, and which was actually the game changer. The strike on the Tiger Hill, you may have seen the videos, that there was so much of precision strike which happened on the Tiger Hill by the Mirages. Then another is that we also got into, which actually the Air Force is meant to neutralize the targets of logistic bases. So Muntho Dalo was another huge logistic base which was struck so effectively that actually after that, which had the effect right in the people in the front. They will fall short of the logistics, their weapons, the food, and the sustenance basically that gets affected. That was another very, very huge achievement of the Air Force. And another achievement which I guess not many people know about it is the achievement of the MiG-25 Foxbat aircraft, which flies beyond 50,000, 60,000, 70,000 feet. It can go into Pakistan, it can go to anywhere, it cannot be detected, can do nothing about it. So that aircraft was used once again beyond the capability of their own performance of the aircraft to take good pictures of these targets like Muntho Dalo. And the pilot who did it was again my coursemate, India coursemate. It's called Thakur, Dr. Nikamado Thakur. He was the one, in fact, a lot of people could say that we cannot do it, maybe because of the experience, but he once again went out of the books because he had to come down, not fly at such a height. He had to come down and be within the recognizable or spottable range of the enemy, and also fly at very, very low speeds to take good quality pictures. And those are the pictures which helped to strike these logistic bases of the enemy. So innovation, creativity, all these out of the books, and I guess we have written books for now for the entire world how we can fight in these altitudes.
Thank you, Anil. That was a very good coverage of the air operations. And as a person on the ground at that point of time, I can tell you what a huge impact it has on the morale of the ground troops when you see your own aircraft flying over you. So I think the Air Force did a commendable piece of work during the entire war. And now the Navy is the silent service, but its impact is tremendous. In fact, if you see today and hereafter, it will be the leading service, in my view, as far as the three services are concerned, in influencing any war which might take place either on the subcontinent or outside the subcontinent. I think so. The Navy has a very important role. What happened in 1999 is the impact of the involvement of the Navy or the deployment of the Navy hastened the termination of the conflict to a large extent. So, Satish, I'll start with just asking you that once Operation Talwar was declared by the government, gave you the go-ahead, what was the overall strategy in the war room which was being evolved? And also just like you to cover how the Eastern Fleet was also moved, despite our superiority in the Western Fleet over the Pakistan Navy. Yeah, please.
General Bharatwaj, Sangeeta the principal, General Mohinder Puri sir, fellow panelist Commodore Sinha, General Harinder, Admiral Anup Singh, staff and students. I am indeed delighted to be here. Great to be here. We have some outstanding hospitality. We really had a very good time. First of all, I'd like to pay a tribute to the Army and the Air Force for making such huge sacrifices. Navy did, quite frankly, not as much as you suffered for the country. 527 deaths in the Indian context, it means that you have affected 3 generations of those families and 1,500 injured. And sir, you continue to sacrifice your today for your tomorrow. Big salute to the Army especially. Now, can you put the slides? In the morning, you saw, Admiral Anup Singh had given a very outstanding presentation on geography, and that helps me with my presentation. So I will use some of those maps also. Now, what happens in the Indian military-civil relationship is that a decision on war and similar instances is taken at the Cabinet Committee of Security, and then it is passed to the COSC. From the COSC, it is passed to the chiefs, individual chiefs in the service. In the naval case, in the Navy, Chief of Naval Staff is in Delhi. He passes on to CNC West, which was Admiral Madhvendra Singh. CNS was Admiral Sushil Kumar. And then he passes on the directives to the fleet commander who's at sea. And Admiral Anup Singh, if you recall, said that how those submarines and ships are deployed. So the ships are then deployed in task groups, and individual COs execute the various operation orders which are given to them. Now, what was the directive to the Navy? The directive to the Navy by the CCS was strategic deterrence, just to send a message to the Pakistan that we don't want any surprises, you mess with us, we will ruin you. I mean, we wanted to send a very strong message that we don't want anything happening at sea, we are very strong and we'll come back and retaliate in big time. I will just show you. This is the slide of the Indian Ocean. Why I show this to you is because it is very important for you, as we will discuss the theatre of operations for the Kargil War. At sea was limited to the Makran coast and off the western coast, but this is India's ocean. This is the ocean that is named after us. There are 3 big oceans. No ocean is named after a country. Only the Indian Ocean. Your ocean, your country. A peninsula jutting 1,000 miles, a EEZ of 2 million square kilometers with the continental shelf. The sea area that your country occupies is nearly the same as the land area. And as General Puri said, the future lies at sea and the resources below it. So the sea is going to be the main player in the future, and you people must not forget that. Now, these are the sea lines of communication that we see. These are the maritime highways on which the merchant ships ply. These are how the goods are carried. Now, India is 90% of our goods by quantity and 70% by value. They are transported through the sea. Why? Because Pakistan on one side is an enemy, China on the other side is an enemy, and there are these mountain ranges. So we are connected to the rest of the world for trade through sea. Our ships have to ply on these routes, and these are the routes also which we would like to interdict for the enemy. Interdict means you get after the merchant ships and you make sure that the enemy is not able to use. And I have also pointed out some choke points where it is very easy to control the traffic, as it is happening today in Bab el Mandeb, if you see on the west coast, where the Houthis are making sure that the merchant ships don't ply very easily. Now, these are the ports which Admiral Anup Singh had also shown. But what I want for you to see is where is Visakhapatnam, that is on the east coast, and where is Mumbai, which is on the west coast. These are the 2 naval bases in which our warships were based at that time, and up north, Porbandar in Gujarat. And this is the theater of operations, you can say, during the Kargil War. Now, what type of ships did we have at that time? We had an aircraft carrier, Virat, which was unfortunately under refit, but Virat has aircraft on board. We had the Sea Harrier, is a vertical takeoff aircraft and short landing aircraft, and it essentially provides air defense to the formation at sea. That means it remains airborne. If somebody is coming to attack a formation, it provides air defense and destroys those forces. Then you have ships which are armed with missiles. There are some big ships, there are some small ships called destroyers or frigates, and then you have even smaller ships called missile boats, which endurance are limited. In this particular case, the missiles were deployed forward in Okha, in Porbandar, and the ships which were bigger in size, the destroyers and the frigates, they were out at sea in task groups. But we did not have Virat with us, and therefore the Sea Harrier aircraft were deployed on the shore. Then you had, if you recall the slides that you saw in the morning of the submarines, very important slides. Those submarines, you imagine, were deployed off the Pakistani coast. And we also pretended that we had deployed those submarines off Hormuz. Now, if you compare the forces at that time, we were very much stronger. We could muster about 35 to 40 frontline ships, operational ships, as opposed to 10, 15 which the Pakistanis had, of which only some 4 or 5 were really, operational ops worthy. And now, how do navies fight? When you see how the Air Force fights and how the Army fights, they bomb, they take bunkers. What do the navies do? The navies first put out aircraft in the air, which are called long-range maritime patrol aircraft. They see the situation, they see where the enemy units are. They develop what we call the maritime domain awareness. When they know who's where, they have got these ships which are at sea, and they task them to interdict either the merchant shipping or the warships. They also would like to blockade harbors. The blockade is legally a declaration of war, is more important than that. But we don't want their ports to be effective. That's the only way that you can strangulate their economy. And then we like to sink the enemy naval units so that they don't interfere with us. And we also have to defend our own infrastructure, which is maybe offshore or on the land, and make sure that we are able to destroy the infrastructure of the enemy. Now, what was the plan of our Navy? Now, even on the 5th of May, when this intrusion was first detected, at that time, General Malik, he was on a visit abroad, and we were still figuring out, our army was still figuring out as to what is the extent of the intrusion. Admiral Sushil Kumar was the chairman, Chiefs of Staff Committee. I distinctly remember that he, on that particular day, when he was informed, he says, this is going to become very serious. He called up Admiral Madhvinder Singh in Bombay and Eastern Naval Command CNC and told them to prepare their ships for participation in a war. Now, a ship, typically, if it is operational, it is worthy to fight a war, but you have to ammunition it, you have to put some extra rations and fuel, and then in case of ships in Vizag, they have to transit all the way, which takes up to 4 to 5 days to reach Mumbai. So this alarm he set in the Navy: prepare for an operational deployment. Eastern Fleet was swung. We were only 4 or 5 ships. What General Puri said was that, why did you have to do that? In the sense that, why did you have to have so much of force? But if you see, Pakistan has a coastline of only 990 kilometers. We have a coastline of 7,500. Actually, the coastline is much longer now by new measurements. We have 1,200 islands. They have only some 12 islands. So the responsibilities of the Navy are more. Secondly, we under no circumstances wanted them to even throw a stone on our shores, because in 1965 their ships had come and bombarded the Dwarka coast, and they say that we have carried out an attack on the Indian coast, and they celebrate the Navy Day for that when they caused really no harm. So we did not want that to be happening. So submarines were deployed off the Makaran coast, ships were deployed in task force, Harriers operating from shore. There were other ships like auxiliaries, like survey ships, training ships. They were converted into hospital ships should in the opportunity arise. And the merchant shipping was rerouted. So that if these slocks that I showed you, the sea lines of communication, the merchant ships were told to follow a longer route so that they are out of the range of the Pakistani long-range maritime patrol aircraft, which were incidentally superior in some ways to our aircraft at that time. So this is, in short, what the plan was, but what Admiral Sushil Kumar wanted. Normally, what happens in the services is you try and keep your plan secret. In this particular case, it was the opposite. He wanted to publicize more deployment than even had. So as soon as the ships coming from Visakhapatnam reached Cochin, he had a photographer take a photo of that and then send that photograph to one of the Gulf countries and publicize that Indian Navy is deploying in a big manner, so that that information reaches the Pakistan Navy and they get scared. And they got scared. We publicized a leak of an email asking our DA in Muscat in Oman. If you see where Oman is at the next Hormuz, we sent a message to him that prepare for an evacuation of a sailor on a medical emergency. And that found, way to the media, but actually there was no submarine there. And there was no sailor to be evacuated. But Pakistan thought that, my God, their submarines are deployed as far as Hormuz and we better, be aware. So there were these deception measures which, we employed. And the first thing which was done was that, Admiral Sushil Kumar was a very visionary kind of a person. He was, I would say, ahead of his time in some ways. And he knew that in this war, this information warfare is going to gain a lot of importance. So he asked for a coding to be done on emails. We call it now SECIM, so that you are able to send messages to your embassies and not have it decrypted. And all this messaging was taking place on SECIM. What else did he do? So this is the photograph of a Sea Harrier which is landing on an aircraft carrier. The Sea Harrier, as I told you, lands vertically. It takes off vertically and lands. So theoretically, to a layman, it can operate from any ship. So since our aircraft carrier was under refit and not available, he morphed a picture. He morphed a picture like this, where, he put this and put this in the newspapers saying the Indian Navy is practicing Sea Harrier operations from merchant ships. And then a similar picture morphed from a smaller deck, the Ganga, and put that also that they are practicing Sea Harrier landing and from, smaller ships. This is the photograph of few ships in harbor, but he took a photograph like this when ships were based were bunkering in Kochi, and sent this to the Gulf, that Eastern Fleet is, moving to Bombay. Is that it? Okay. So then also we had the amphibious brigade in Port Blair, shifted to Mangalore, had 2 or 3 landing craft there, made them do some exercise on the beaches, took pictures, and then publicized into the media to say that the Indian Navy is practicing landing on the Makaran coast. So you can imagine the kind of hype that was, built up, so that, they dare not, do any, surprise us. Now, the Indian Navy also was technically, I would say, had capabilities which could help in the contribution to the conflict. We had aircraft Dorniers which were equipped with DF equipment, and they flew along the LOC to take bearings of the emitters to fix various radar positions, and this was of help. Then we do very accurate surveys at sea, for which we had an advanced DG-DPS system which is able to locate the position very accurately. And those Bofor guns which you saw in the movies firing, they need to be placed very accurately. So our DG-DPS teams were in Kargil to help positioning of those Bofors guns. We also had a contract at that time with the Israel government to give us some data, and that Israeli data that we got, satellite data, also helped the army. I'm sorry, sir, but I have just...
Thank you, Satish. I just want to, surprise and deception which the... surprise and deception which the Admiral mentioned. I think that was, and the build-up of the Eastern Fleet onto the western side is what contributed to the hastening or the termination of the conflict. It took the Americans by surprise. It took... Pakistan became aware of what was really happening in the area of operations as far as the Navy is concerned. Now, before we end your session, Satish,
yes,
can you just very briefly tell us where does the Navy stand today as far as its potential is concerned?
Yes, sir, I will. Before that, two things I forgot to mention. One is that on account of all our efforts, Pakistan Navy was not to be seen. They went into hiding. They went into harbors. And they started escorting their 2-3 ships which are operational. They started escorting their tankers from the Strait of Hormuz and staying very close to the coast to avoid our submarines. Now, there is a concept of blockade and maritime exclusion zones which we practice. A blockade, we declare a blockade against the enemy on the harbors, and which means that the neutral, because in our case, not unlike the Army and the Air Force, there are neutrals in the area. So if you want to target only the enemy, what about the neutrals? You can earn a very bad name. So to avoid damaging them, we have this concept. So we have to declare a blockade and give some time to the neutrals to move out and then target the enemy, which we did not do because this is an act of war. The government interposed it. Then we have a concept of maritime exclusion zone, where along our coast we say that this is, please don't come here. This is our area. If you come here, we will consider you as enemy. So we wanted to declare the maritime exclusion zone, a softer portion along the entire Makaran and Indian coast, but which also the government did not allow because the enemy was, the government was trying to be, very conservative, and they did not want to escalate a situation and did not give. Now, sir, to a specific question about where the Indian Navy is doing very, very well. We are about 130 odd ships and submarines. In the last few years, we have not had as many commissionings, but now onwards, you will see up to 5 or 6 commissionings a year, and we aim to reach something like 170, by 2035 or so, and including aircraft. The dominant geographical position that we have in the Indian Ocean bestows us a capability of making sure that nobody interferes with our sea lines of communication in the Indian Ocean region. Most importantly, the Indian Navy is highly indigenous in the sense that today the ships that we are making, there are 67 ships on order, of which only 2 ships are being made in a Russian shipyard. It is an old order. But the rest 65 are being made in our own shipyards. And the indigenous content of this is huge, up to 70-80%. Even the aircraft carrier that we have made, INS Vikrant, there's about 70% indigenous content. Now, such a vast ocean that we see. It is very important for us. It is not possible for Indian Navy to kind of manage the entire ocean by themselves. So we engage in maritime diplomacy, which for us is very important, to be friendly with neighbors, to have a good relationship with extra regional powers who have interest in the Indian Ocean, to have good relationships with the major navies. So we exercise with all the navies, all the major navies, whether it is the US, French, British, Japan, Australia. We exercise with all the navies. They gain a lot from us. We gain a lot from them. We learn to operate together against common challenges which are at sea, and we also train foreign trainees of the. You see, while the extra-regional navies are important, but more important are our immediate neighbors. They may be smaller in size, whether it is Maldives, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Mauritius, Seychelles. We give a lot of importance to them. Over 800-900 persons, officers and sailors are getting trained by us. We give them ships, we give them aircraft, sometimes gratis, sometimes at very low prices. We do EEZ surveillance of the exclusive economic zones for them using our assets. We carry out survey for them. So we do a lot, as much, and tightening our belts, we help them, because we know that your neighbors are more important and will help you more than people who are, distant from you. So Indian Navy is in a very good shape. We are doing very well. We have increasing amount of challenges, especially in China. Pakistan Navy also, during this conflict, had very few ships. They hardly posed a challenge, but not so today. They are buying 8 more submarines from China. They bought some 4 ships. They are buying more aircraft. They are buying corvettes from Turkey. So they are today a navy, a little better equipped navy. But more importantly, China, which was not to be seen in the Indian Ocean, came in 2008 for the first time, ostensibly to do an anti-piracy patrol. And then they have stayed put over here. There are 5 to 6 warships and survey ships always in the Indian Ocean region. They have economic interdependence with the African peninsula. They want their resources. There is a market for their goods. So trade for them is very important, and therefore they are here and they are going to be here. So if you have to, and China is not a friend, and if China is strong, they are going to make their presence is going to motivate the Pakistan Navy, also to create trouble. So we are going to see in years to come a collusion between the Pakistan Navy and the Chinese Navy, and our challenges at sea are going to increase. The challenges also increase not only because of these traditional challenges, but non-traditional challenges also, whether it is climate change, effects of climate change, or it is increase of these ships which are disturbing the ecosystems in this thing, whether it is human migration, whether it is drug trafficking. Today the seas have become very, very important, not only for this but also for blue economy. You have got minerals which are down below at the seabed. You can extract those minerals. And there are Chinese have interests over there. Koreans have interests over there. So this is going to be, you will find in years to come the focus will shift to the seas. And if India has to progress, and we are destined to be the 3rd largest economy. If we have to be a 3rd largest economy, we have to be at least 3rd largest navy, 3rd strongest navy. So we have to invest in the navy, invest not only in the navy but in our maritime assets, whether it is the Coast Guard, whether it is the merchant marine, whether it is survey ships, whether it is fishing, everything. Navy and the seas, as General Mohinder Puri said, is really the future. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.